Alright, so as we're getting to the end of the season, which by the time this video comes out, ice climbing season is probably done for 2022 and 2023. And, I got to spend some time in these boots again. Now, these are the G5 EVO from Sportiva, and they were my main boot last season, but I kind of moved on to the G-Tech this season, and ever since I moved on, I really never looked back. I just wore these boots just a couple of times, and like maybe the few times I did, I wasn't a huge fan of it. There's definitely some things that were still prominent that I didn't like about the boots. But after like one final day of probably the final day of the ice climbing season, I wore these and, they still worked good. Um, I've covered these boots on a couple separate videos, whether that's the comparison between the G-Tech, and then I did a solo review when I had them for my first season of ice climbing. And ever since that, I really haven't done a whole lot in them. Like I mentioned, I did just kind of switch to the G-Tech. But, let's kind of go over some things that, the boot still does well. Right off the bat, what I can say is that these boots are definitely built to last, and they're built like tanks. Everything from, the outsole, which is the old Vibrant rubber, which is bomb proof. All the inserts are super well. After climbing in them for 2 seasons, they show hardly any wear. The built-in kind of gaiter is in good condition. The waterproofing's in good condition. Everything is just in really good condition of these boots. After 2 seasons of use, they really don't look like they have been used for 2 seasons. And last season, I did wear them every day I went out, but I was going out almost 2 to 3 times a week. And they definitely don't show wear. I mean, the one thing that they've always shown is that kind of little scuff right there. That scuff is just due to hopping over a rail, a road guard, I guess, yeah. And I accidentally just scuffed it on that like the second day I had them on the season last year. But other than that, like they really haven't shown anywhere. So the durability of these boots is very high. And there are some little features that you get that these offer that the G-Tech doesn't. They do offer like this little Velcro going over the zipper. I don't really know how much of a play that really has into the total waterproofing, because the zipper itself is waterproof. So I don't know, but it definitely, I don't know, makes the boot look kind of cool. But a bigger one is that it has this little bungee right here that goes across the whole gaiter and it cinches it down. That's actually super nice to have whenever you're going through like a little like creek crossings, or you're trying to make sure that snow doesn't get in, or you're just trying to seal out the weather. Those little bungees actually work really well, and those are super nice. And yeah, the G5 EVO was kind of one of the first boots in La Sportiva's like newer remodel for boots in 2020 that put the Boa Dial on the outside. That was super helpful because it just meant that you wouldn't have to unzip the boot and tighten the boa that way. So having the Boa Dial on the outside is definitely nice. And yeah, so those are kind of the things that still continue to be really well with these boots. But let's definitely get into kind of their shortcomings. And they're more shortcomings for me. If you go into the comment sections of any of the videos I've talked about the G5 EVO, I've constantly mentioned that they don't fit my foot as well because they're a higher volume boot. They take after the Nepal last, and that last just doesn't really work with my foot. My foot works better with the G-Tech because the G-Tech is based on the equilibrium last. So personally, I have a low volume foot, so because of these boots being more high volume centric, my feet kind of swim in them. I do have to wear thicker socks, and that's what I did find, that if I wear like the Smartwool Classic Mountaineering sock, it definitely fills the space in these, and that's super nice to have, because it does definitely cut out some of that like void that is normally in the boots when you wear a thinner sock. So wearing a thicker sock with these definitely helps. But what I can kind of tell, the boa system, I'm not a huge fan on the pattern of these boots, how they constrict and where they're constricting. I feel like I always constantly have to almost max out how tight the boa can go just to get my foot secure. And like I said, that could be a thing of, you know, because I have a low volume foot, so it really just needs to, like, it just needs to clamp down that much more. But I almost feel like the BOA system within the past like 2 years has really gotten better for Sportiva's boots, because the G Tech just feels way better on the BOA. And that kind of leads me to another point with the BOA is it feels like with these boots that after like a given amount of time, the BOA starts to loosen up. Now, I don't know if that is actually for sure what's happening, but it definitely feels like it. There's a lot of times when I go to the base of the climb and I tighten the boot up and it's really tight because I want it super secure. And by the time I'm either being lowered, if I'm doing like a nice cragging day, or by the end of like the pitch, they started to loosen up and they felt sloppy. And I don't really know what exactly that is. I don't know if it is a problem with the BOA of just like in 2020, that's kind of what happened. I don't know if it's the lacing style, the cables. I don't know what exactly it is, but it does seem to loosen up, and it seems like other people have been also having that problem. So I'm not just the only one who's dealing with that. So be aware of that. I think in the last 2 years, the BOA system has gotten better. So yeah, just kind of be aware of that. Talking about the BOA, it's really weird that the two boots don't tighten the same way. The right boot you turn clockwise, and the left boot you turn counterclockwise, and that sometimes messes me up because they don't tighten the same way. I mean, theoretically, no, it is the same way. It's just backwards on the left boot. It's not counterclockwise. It's just clockwise. Whereas the G-Tech, those boots, they both go, the right boot goes clockwise and the left boot goes counterclockwise, so they're always tightening like forward. You're always spinning the dial forward. That just seems like a little bit better. Not that it's like a huge thing, but it's just like a little weird quirk about the G5 EVO is that they tighten both clockwise, but on the left boot it seems like it's backwards. So I don't know. That's just like a quirk with the boots. But yeah, those are kind of like the, maybe the downsides and maybe the quirks. They're definitely warm for a single boot, and that's just kind of due that it's a little bit more material. But even with what I found is that the G-Techs were just as warm for the G5 as the G5 EVO, but that could be due to a better fit for me. Other than that, the boots still perform well. The only thing that has kind of really like led me away from them is that these are more of like an old school style, and that sounds totally funny because these boots came out in 2020 and that was just 3 years ago now, and they do feel like they're dated. It's really crazy to be in the G-Techs and have them feel so much more advanced and more futuristic than these. And like, even though that these, I think what did it was really switching to the Nepal last. The Nepal last is a far better last. It fits more people better, and it's easier to transition from like the Nepal Evo or the Nepal Cube to these because they will fit pretty dang the same. But the only downside is that you do get a bigger, clunkier boot. And I don't feel as precise in these boots as I do in the G-Tech. I've mentioned it before that the G-Tech got me to really switch over to monos because I felt super secure on monos. Whereas these, I've climbed in monos in these and they're not bad, but they feel like a big boot. And whereas the G-Tech feels like a precise, nimble boot. And, maybe with dual points with these, if you're just climbing like tons of pitches of ice, these will work great. They're classic style. They're going to have that stiff platform, and you're not going to get much foot fatigue. But even in the G-Tech, I haven't had that much foot fatigue. I actually probably get more foot fatigue in these just because they're so stiff to walk in, whereas the G-Techs walk a little bit better. So, yeah, that is kind of the thing. You got to know that these G5 EVOs kind of walk like ski boots. They're kind of weird and they're not super comfortable, but it is what it is. It's a stiff boot. But yeah, like you can definitely tell that they're a heavier boot. I did a test probably about a month ago. I was just curious to see how they compare to like the G-Tech in weight on foot. So I just got on the ground and had my feet up, and I went to raise my feet to do like a faux figure four, and I like definitely noticed how much heavier the G5 EVO was on my feet. So you do feel some weight. But with that being said, this past time that I got out to go ice climbing, I also did some dry tooling, and I dry tooled in these, and they worked fine. I got up the climb, it just like they work still. You know, they're not a boot that's going to inhibit you from climbing. They just feel like an older style boot after you've been in like a newer like boot like the G-Tech. But other than that, they are still a really solid boot. And if you know that the Nepal last fits you really well, I'd go for these. You know, that Nepal last, it's a good last for most, and just not for me. And that's why I did switch over. But overall, I mean, it's seriously incredible how well these boots have stood up after 2 seasons. And yeah, you know, they're definitely a quality boot. They're a bomb-proof boot. They're going to last for a long time. They're going to see multiple pitches of ice and maybe a lot of dry tooling as well. So, like I said, if the Nepal last fits you, go for these boots. They're still solid, but they're just a little bit. There's just enough quirks with them that just make them a little bit weird. But that's with anything, though. So, yeah, that's kind of like a 2-season review of the La Sportiva G5 EVO. If you have any questions, you can obviously ask them away in the comment section. But I do implore you to also look at the previous videos that I've done with the G-Tech and G5 EVO, because, you know, if you go to the comment sections on those, hopefully you might find your question. Maybe you might find an answer. But as always, if you have a new question or just have a question in general, feel free to comment, and I will get to it as quickly as I possibly can. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.